Hey everyone, thanks again for joining with us here on The Current. This is Real Talk on Real Topics. My name is Beau. I'm with Curtis. Again, we're addressing a topic that should be a lot of fun, and today's topic is alcohol, and specifically alcohol use, I think, amongst Christians or just maybe in general. We want to give our take on that. This should be a good, fun dialogue today.
Definitely. This is one of those topics that I think it was when you moved here and we had some conversations, I had known there was some difference in terms of culture and some thought on this. But when you described to me kind of your background and how alcohol was perceived and kind of related to amidst Christians for your circle, I don't know, I'd never experienced that world. So I thought it'd be fun just to start and give us a little background about your context with alcohol in the church.
Yeah, that's good. So growing up as a kid, we didn't have alcohol in our home, really. And I think I don't know if I ever saw my parents drink alcohol in our home. Maybe. They'll probably listen and tell me that I'm crazy. They do that often. But, I don't remember them drinking. I remember them maybe having we went to Mexico on vacation, and I remember them being in the pool, maybe having a drink. But I never really saw them consuming alcohol. But here's the thing. I never really saw any of my friends' parents or anyone that we drink regularly, or I don't know. Maybe it's just kind of, again, the culture where I think Southern Baptist kind of that idea is where it's alcohol's frowned upon, just stay away. That's worldly, type of attitude. And so I first consumed alcohol, I think in college was maybe my first time I consumed alcohol, and obviously had a blast because I'd never really done it before, but I realized okay, this is something that's fun, but it can be dangerous. Yeah. Especially in a college setting where, really the only goal is to just get obliterated. And anyway, so I had to learn very quickly, moderation and what that looked like. But that was about the same time though that I was beginning to pursue a ministry degree, and so anyway, so I served in a couple churches where, again, it was kind of frowned upon. But then when I moved to Mason City, I've told people the difference in culture, alcohol consumption is unbelievable. I did not think this was even possible. So just an example. So if we went to a party, or my parents went to a party, no one brought alcohol or would consider bringing alcohol with them. And here, you throw a party and it's everybody just has a six pack, or they bring something to drink. It's just such a cultural difference across the board of just how normal it is. I was just blown away by that when I moved here, and it was just okay. It was okay in the church, outside the church. Everyone just viewed it as oh, it's okay. Obviously in moderation. I think most people would argue.
Sure.
And obviously I think the Christian position is, not for everybody. We'll talk about that. But yeah. I think at least in this setting, Rhythm Church, it's really been kind of one of those things where, okay, it's something that can be enjoyed, but obviously in moderation. And I was just wait, what?
Whoa.
And the idea of serving wine for communion was just totally new to me.
Always the grape juice.
Yeah, always grape juice. Always, never. Never. I grew up in church or served in the churches I served in before Rhythm where they served wine as the communion elements. I was just blown away.
You're blowing my mind right now.
Yeah. Whereas some people, again, I know, now having talked to people, having conversations with people, Lutheran background, it was only wine. The idea of serving grape juice is comical. Anyway, it's just so crazy the cultural difference.
I guess makes me want to ask you a question. You talked about inside the church and outside the church. Where you kind of grew up in the South, was it kind of the same both ways? Hey, Christians were kind of alcohol's not good, and maybe they had some reasons for it. Would you say, and I'm sure it's probably a very culturally Christian place, but would you say that even outside the church, the kind of the general idea was that alcohol is not a great thing, or was it more of a Christian thing?
Yeah,
in that
I think
area?
I mainly just was around Christians, and so it's probably just a Christian thing. I think obviously, alcohol consumption is normal there outside the church. Okay. But still it's less. It's still this thing where again, it's predominantly a Christian culture. So it's just not near as just socially accepted. I feel as it is here. So
I guess I guess when it comes to Christians and alcohol usage, and there's like a scale here for sure, but the general thing is like, hey, no, it's bad, or yes, it's okay, maybe in certain instances. I guess in the conversations you had there around the church, being around Christians who said, hey, alcohol's not a good thing, what was kind of the behind it? You know, what was the fear, or what they say was bad about it, or why did they want to avoid it?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it was just viewed as why do it? You know, like if you're not drinking to get drunk, then what's the point? And again, like I think it can be enjoyed. I think some people just honestly enjoy the taste, or you know, like whatever. Like I think it can be enjoyed, but the perception was like it's like temptation. Like you know, like just don't bother because nothing good comes from that. Just stay away.
Yeah,
you know. Whereas like I would argue. And again, we talk more about some of these arguments, but like there's other things in life that I think can be enjoyed in moderation where, you know, some people like, I mean, I don't know, like playing cards or like, you know, like, I mean, like something like that where it's like be considered gambling. Well, like obviously you don't need to be, you know, not being able to pay your bills, but like playing a friendly card game, you know, for money or something like things like that, or like, you know, wagering a little bit. Like, I mean, I get like, again, like there might be different opinions on that too, but in moderation, I feel like it can be healthy. Whereas like to answer your question, it was just like, why even just leave it, don't even mess with it. Like, cause it's just, there's nothing but just bad things that come from it.
It's all negative. There's nothing good to be gained here. There's why as Christians engage. It's just, you know.
Yeah. But like, you know, the more I studied the New Testament and the Bible, I'm like, okay, Jesus' first miracle was like they ran out of alcohol at a party, you know, this wedding feast that he's at, and he's like, I got you, you know, and turns a bunch of water into wine. Like, I mean, it's just, I know some people say, well, that was grape juice, but like, come on, really, you know.
I guess that. So, would you say, when making your move over to Iowa, would you say as you got here, it was kind of, oh wait, let me reconsider? Would you say like when you got here, like, alcohol's bad, I shouldn't be touching it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think part of it was just getting more comfortable, just being around people, because everywhere we went, like people were, you know, like we get invited over for dinner and, you know, they were drinking wine or they were having a beer, and it was just like, okay, like, you know, it's like it took a little bit to kind of just understand like, wow, this is just socially normal, you know, like this is okay. Like, you know, so of course I think it took, you know, Abby and I some time to get comfortable with that, but I don't know if we necessarily intentionally switched our view. I think it was more about just like settling into the culture and understanding, okay, this is a big part of just what people do here. And like, I'm okay with that. Like, I think it's cool, you know, like it's, it's just not how we grew up. You know? And Abby was the same way. Like my wife's a similar experience, you know, she didn't grow up around it or knew anybody that really consumed alcohol on a regular basis. And so again, being in an environment and a culture in which it's so just normal, you know, and it's not like everybody's like, you know, it's really cool as a pastor. I can go places like, so obviously I was a pastor in Texas twice. Yeah. But I would go to like, there's a restaurant, it's called BJ's, and it's a large, usually the restaurants are very large, but it's like tons of beers on tap and like pizza, and like, it's just a really cool place. And I would like want a beer so bad, but I just couldn't. I just couldn't do it because I was so scared of like what somebody would think in public. Well, here, like people buy me a beer, you know, like seriously, like just nice. They're like, hey, like, can I get you one? I want to buy you one. You know, it's like stuff like that. I'm like, this is great. Like, this is awesome. You know, like, I mean, again, I don't have to worry about that here just because of the culture. It's just such a normal part of then. And I would never like ever, you know, like give a thumbs up or a green light to abusing alcohol whatsoever. Always in moderation, but it's just nice to not have to, because it's something I do enjoy. It's something I do appreciate. And like, I love beer. I love the way it tastes. I enjoy consuming it, but it's just nice knowing I can go in public and have a beer and not just be like, you know, look at him, you know, it's like, so anyway,
I don't know. It is a very different culture. Again, hearing that, and I know there are some Christians that I had been around who would say, alcohol is just in general bad, not something that should be touched. And so it's funny to me, things that aren't even on my radar. You know, I grow up in a place where it's just a given, granted thing that alcohol can be an okay thing. I think, like you said, we don't want to give a green light and just say whatever. Like most things, we want to say, hey, we need to think well about why we do what we do. I guess maybe let's take some time and speak to that. Okay, alcohol can be okay. Is instances where it can be bad? What should the Christian have in mind when trying to engage with this substance?
Yeah, I think, you read the scriptures and, Paul writes in Ephesians, like there's maybe a couple different spots, but I remember in Ephesians 5, so don't be given to drunkenness, filled with the Spirit. And so I think anytime, alcohol is referenced in the scriptures, it's always, drunkenness is wrong.
Yeah.
Bad. And you're missing the mark. Like you shouldn't be, looking to get drunk,
Yeah.
and I totally agree. I'm cool with that. I think that's, there's bad decisions that are made. People are drunk. There's lives at risk. We talk about driving a vehicle drunk or
Absolutely.
things like that. Like it can be dangerous. It can be harmful. It's not the intent that God, I don't think, has for alcohol.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And so I think when I read the scriptures that is the line. Now again, where that line is practically, I think the law determines that. As far as drunk driving, obviously there's blood alcohol levels that are appropriate and not appropriate. And I'm always extremely cautious with that, but it's the law kind of determines, I guess, what that is sometimes. But
yeah,
I think it's comes down to, like your own spiritual conviction. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but, yeah, I kind of, when I read the scriptures, it kind of draws the line at drunkenness in my opinion.
I think that's right on. I think Paul contrasts this two ideas of being filled with wine, being drunk with it, and being filled with the Spirit. And it's kind of this analogy of like what leads you, what's guiding you, what's kind of, and I think we can reach a point where like, yeah, what's leading me, what's affecting my decisions, what's, in charge here is no longer me and or the Spirit, but now it's the alcohol. And that's a difficult line, like you said, to just draw really neatly. But I'm a big proponent of this idea that like, yeah, we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because it's bad in some instances doesn't mean it's bad in all. And so thinking through other examples in the Bible, I love that you bring up Jesus' first miracle. He turns water to wine. I think that's really important too. But I think other places like, I want to say it's 1 Timothy, but Paul writes talking to Timothy and tells him, hey, have a glass of wine with your dinner to help your stomach. Like they recognize alcohol can have some helpfulness in terms of helping some ailments. Or I think it's in the Psalms, David talks about how wine makes the heart glad. There's something where there's, I think a giftedness by God to us in alcohol, something to be enjoyed, but also something that can be abused or made ultimate, And
Sure.
I think that's where we run into some issues.
Yeah, and I want to, again, pivot the conversation again towards that because I have a dear friend, for example. His name's Tim, and he's been in and out of like recovery his entire life, just trying to stay sober. And alcohol abuse was kind of his number one thing. There was other drugs at some points, in his life, but alcohol was kind of the main one. And I'll never forget, ask him to go to Buffalo Wild Wings, but for some reason, that particular place was a trigger, and he would always say, "No, I can't go there." And for him, like his conviction, like where the Spirit was leading him, is like, no, don't even be in an environment in which that could become a thing, And so he's always just very careful. Those boundaries that he had to set for himself, and I totally understand that, and I want to honor that. And that's a whole nother argument where, the idea of not causing a brother to stumble, and so that's something I'm careful of too. Like when I'm in public or consuming alcohol, like I'll kind of gauge the room, see who's around, because I don't want to be a stumbling block. I don't want to be, like the pastor's drinking, I can try one too. And so that's something I'm careful of as well. And that was, I should have mentioned that earlier, but that was, again, an argument in the South too, is like, don't cause another brother to stumble. So like, again, there's people out there that struggle with it. And if you're doing it, and I get that argument too. And I really have. So like when I was in youth ministry here in Mason City, there's a couple times, I think we were at Buffalo Wild Wings, for example, or a place like that. And one of our servers would be a girl in our youth group, and I just wouldn't, I just wouldn't get a beer then because, again, I don't want it to view as like I'm celebrating it or like, for her, she's obviously underage, and, I don't want that temptation to be there. It's like, I saw my youth pastor drinking, like it must be okay, and so there's situations like that where I think the Spirit still convicts me, where like, okay, like I'm not going to, consume alcohol in this particular context or around these particular people. There's been instances too, since I've lived here, where there's people that I've been around that like really struggle with gossip, and like for some reason they tend to make up things and like say stuff that happened that didn't happen in particular settings. And so I just am like, I'm just not gonna drink around them because like I don't want to be accused of something that I wasn't the case, or like, because it's easy for somebody to say like after I've had a couple beers and be like, well, Beau's still just hammered at my house, like that's not gonna happen. Like I'm not okay. Like if that's how you're gonna be, I just won't drink. Like because it's not one of those things where like I have to, or I feel like I enjoy it, but it's one of those things where it's like easily I'd just be like, okay, well it's not worth it. It's not worth my influence to be potentially tainted or ruined because of a rumor or like things like that. So I think there's wisdom in certain scenarios. And again, the Spirit always kind of prompts that and convicts that in me, which that's all I would hope for in anybody talking about this issue is, again, if you're like my buddy Tim, who needs to just stay away, even from environments that celebrates it, all the way to, enjoying it on a regular basis or whatever that looks like. I think the Spirit will ultimately just kind of convict where you lie on the spectrum. And I'm okay with that. Again, as long as like maybe drunkenness is the line, like where I would argue is like, okay, that's the line. Anywhere on that spectrum I think is okay, depending on where the Spirit convicts you.
And I think that's such a healthy attitude to have. Like, we want sometimes to be able to have this like pointed to instance where here's where it becomes bad, or here's where the issue is. And I think even Paul's not afraid to go and say like, here's bad, here's wrong, don't do this, Christians, we need to do this, Christians. But he also is fine to say that there are matters which I think need to be attended to by one's conscience. What's good for one isn't good for all necessarily. And so I think that's so right. While there are people who can responsibly, healthily handle alcohol, there are people where that's not the case given certain dispositions or medical conditions or whatever, And so, I would hope that they would follow their convictions too and say, maybe it's not good for me to do this. Doesn't mean that it's wrong in all instances, but this isn't right for me here.
Yeah, I know we were talking about this earlier. I'll let you speak to this too. Like, I think another thing we have to be really careful of, especially in America, I don't know, there might be listeners that, I don't know, maybe near Canada or somewhere else, but I know in just American culture, the abuse of alcohol is almost celebrated and expected. Like, I was talking about in college how, like, no one's goal when I was in college, I think on every college campus, this is probably the same way. When you go out on the weekend or you're, out with your friends, there is no like, I'm going to enjoy this responsibly. It's like, how messed up can I get? And it's just crazy. But I think, again, it's just a kind of American culture where the abuse of alcohol is celebrated. And it's like, well, why aren't you getting drunk? Like, well, how could you like just have a couple drinks? Like, what do you mean? Like, come on, like, let me buy you a shot. It's like, no, I'm good. I'm good at, it's like, again, that idea is just like kind of celebrated. So I didn't know if you want,
Yeah, well, I definitely, I don't know. I think you're right. It'd be hard to go to a college campus in America and not find some serious alcohol abuse going on, And I wonder what that is, about our culture that creates that. Because, I don't know. I think even in our movies and our media and stuff, as you're growing up, like you think, well, I go to college and what I do is I like party because that's what college is about. And like, alcohol is about getting trash, like that's what its intended use is. And I don't know that I know exactly what it is that's caused us to celebrate that or caused us to say, yep, this is what alcohol is about just getting annihilated.
And again, like what we were talking about was like in contrast to other countries.
Oh yeah.
Where that's just not the case.
No, I mean, you think like in Germany, you can go like there's, I believe this is correct. You can like get beers with your McDonald's meals, like, and there's not an intense drinking age, like, and that's not to say that there shouldn't be one. We need to have conversations about that. But we notice in other cultures, other societies, alcohol isn't as rampantly abused. Like it just in its culture has the ability to be respected and used like healthily. And that's not to say there aren't people in Germany who do abuse alcohol, but it seems to me, at least on the inside here, that it's a bigger problem with America that I don't notice in other ways or in other cultures.
Yeah, I've heard, people from America visiting, England and Germany and all these other places, across the globe. And yeah, it's very just normal to see wine and beer served with meals, but that's just it. It's just what I drink with my meal. It's not me looking to, get tore up or whatever you want to call it. You know, it's like, but again, that's the assumption. And that's where we have to be careful. And again, I want to take it back to like, again, perception and how people are viewing you. I think it's all very important. So, you know, in our leadership here at Rhythm, we've kind of made, not claims, expectations of like people in leadership that are serving, like even with teenagers. When I was leading our youth ministry here, our volunteers agreed. They signed a document saying they would not like post pictures on Facebook of them holding alcohol. Again, because the perception is to those that you're leading, because it's a problem in our culture, if they see you with like a beer on like a social media picture, like with just alcohol, what are they going to think about you? You know?
Sure.
And you know, I hope that maybe someday in our culture that's not the case, where you see somebody holding a beer or a drink like a red Solo or whatever and think, oh my gosh, look at them, like they're getting drunk on the weekends. You know, like I hope that changes.
Yeah.
But I think currently, like as it states, like we just have to be careful. Again, our influence, you have to be able to say, okay, because some people like that made them angry, like they didn't want to do that. I'm like, well, okay, is your influence more important than a social media photo? Like, why can't you just take the picture and like leave it off of there?
Yeah.
Like, sure, if you want the photo, like take the picture, but like you don't have to put it in public for everyone to then think, oh my goodness, like, you know, or whatever they might think.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. Like, again, what is more important, your influence or a social media photo? So, you know, so there's been some kind of expectations just on our end with people and their leadership to say, I'm going to keep my influence intact here by just not posting photos of me alcohol. And I would recommend that to anybody too. If you are in any type of position of influence, especially spiritual influence, especially over those that are younger, like teenagers who it's not legal for them to consume alcohol and like things like that, like just be very careful about the perception you're putting off by doing that. And even since I've lived here, there's been a couple instances where, you know, I maybe had 2 or 3 drinks and there's been people that come up to me and just like, they'll say, hey, you need to be careful. And I'll say, okay, like, you're right. Like, fair enough. Sure. Like, I don't want to, again, at the cost of my influence, enjoy myself a little more or like whatever.
Right.
Like, it doesn't,
is it worth
it's not really worth it, you know? And again, I'm not perfect. Like, I've had, you know, struggles or, you know, like gone too far. I'm not going to say I haven't, but it never makes me feel good. You know, it never is like, I'm like never proud of it or like thinking like, oh my God, like bragged all my friends about how, like, I feel gross and disgusted or like how irresponsible or, you know, like that's often my posture of like, oh gosh, like that's not good. You know, I don't need to do that.
I'd be interested to hear what you think about this. You know, for me, we're talking about, okay, hey, engaging with alcohol, where's the line? Is this okay? I've even thought on just like a physiological level, like what are our bodies telling us? Like when you're going and you're drinking that much and you're puking, your body is like saying like, hey, I have consumed this much. I am being poisoned. I need to remove this from myself, you know?
Sure.
And for me, this is at least like a go-to sign, you know, if it's like, man, if we're drinking to the point where my body needs to expel this substance in fear of like poisoning happening to me, we might need to stop and think a little bit here, you know? Should we be putting in our position where our own body is saying, this is not good for me. I need to get this out.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm right there with you. And yeah, that goes back to where's the line? You know, I know some people that can consume 20 beers before they throw up and some people it's 2, you know, and like, it's just one of those things where, again, I think the Holy Spirit, if you're a Christian, the Holy Spirit will always, I think, prompt you to what's necessary and appropriate. And I swear, I know people where like, I will have 1 drink. Cool. Like, you don't even have to if you don't want. You know, it's like that. I was like, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
For other people, it's much more or much different, and oftentimes how you consume it, how quickly, you know, all those things play a factor. My hope though is just that, again, I think it's a cultural issue where I feel like hopefully we can just move past the abuse of it. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but I hope and pray that it does. That it's not elevated, celebrated, the idea of drunkenness. But at the same time, that we wouldn't cast judgment on those that do choose to partake and enjoy it. It's more about, okay, like the Holy Spirit is at work here. Just trust that. Just trust that the Spirit's at work, especially with Christians, just trusting that process. Because I know it's true in me, and I hope it's true in you and all of you that are
Yeah.
listening. I hope you feel that prompt. And if you don't, maybe do some soul searching. Like maybe really spend some time in prayer and ask God to point out maybe when that limit would be for you, or perception, or, ask for that conviction, because I think it's important. Our influence as Christians is really important. And when we, like we have a phrase around here, we always say we don't want to be too heavenly minded for the earth of good, or, we want to be above the culture where we have no influence.
Right.
We also don't want to be beneath the culture where we lose all of our influence.
Right.
And so I'm not going to sit here today and say Christians shouldn't consume alcohol, but I also won't sit here today and say that Christians also don't struggle with the abuse of alcohol.
Absolutely.
And
again,
yeah,
people sometimes will want that one size fit all answer, and unfortunately, I don't think we can give it. It's not.
But when we look like the world, we lose our influence. You know, like if Christians just like jump in and just like, okay, well, like it doesn't really matter, like just forgiveness, like grace abounds in this area, and like, oh, whatever, like I can do whatever I want. Like we just lose our influence. And I don't want that either. I do not want that to happen at all. You know?
Well, I think, how can we as Christians not be like, oh, let me just retreat away from this and run, but also say, okay, what does it look like for us to model a healthy alcohol usage? What does it look like for us to be able to engage in it and show, like, I can engage in it. Again, David, wine makes the heart glad. This is a gift to be enjoyed from God, and again, a gift to be enjoyed, not abused. And like, let's model that.
Yeah, because obviously our body responds to it, and I think they figured that out centuries ago. Your body responds to it in a way that can be enjoyable for some, and which is fine. Like just in every, like think about just, well, whatever. We'll talk about some of that stuff at some other points. But like oftentimes there are things that are enjoyable for the human experience in moderation are just that enjoyable.
Yeah.
And God created it that way for some reason. Like, I mean, so
enjoyment exists for a reason,
Yeah.
And I know, even thinking through like the church, how it's talked about alcohol, there hasn't been this widespread condemnation of alcohol as this terrible thing,
Yeah.
In fact, one of my favorite quotes around alcohol, I'm not gonna be able to quote it exactly, but Martin Luther has this one where he says like, hey, beer's good. When we drink beer, we kind of get sleepy, and when we sleep, we can't really sin. And so, hey, that's great. Let's drink more beer. Like, this is Luther's thing.
I've never heard that.
And
I
think he's being funny. This isn't like a theological argument, but Luther comes out, and I think he was a guy that enjoyed, Germany, again, a big culture where beer's a part of that culture. But yeah, it wasn't like every Christian around there was scandalized by that. So it's
there's been other theologians that enjoy cigars, like see pictures of them with a cigar in the mouth. Like, again, that's a whole nother topic, like tobacco usage. Maybe we'll talk about that too, but I bet it lands in the same spot. Like, like maybe, I don't know, we'll see. But anyway, I just trust that the Spirit, is convicting people where it needs to be. So I'm cool with just, sorry if that doesn't draw the hard line that some people so desperately want, but you'll find listening to this podcast, there's not many hard lines that we draw, especially on real topics,
which this has been one.
For sure. Cool. Well, thanks for joining with us today. And again, we always appreciate dialogue and feedback. And so if you want to take the time to maybe rate the podcast or give us some feedback, we would love that. If you want to continue the conversation, I know we would love to do that as well. And so reach out to us. You can go to our website, rhythmchurch.org, or you can just comment on YouTube, or I don't know how you can get a hold of us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. But anyway, there's a way to get a hold of us. Just go to rhythmchurch.org and look up our email. We'd love to continue the conversation. And we're always open to feedback too. So if you think we're wrong or right, we'd love to know. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll catch you next Friday right here on The Current. Grace and peace.